I'm a big believer that leaders cast incredibly powerful shadows in organisations, not just in what we say or what we write down on a piece of paper or what we put on a video, but in how we behave on a day-to-day basis. So it kind of starts and ends, I think, with us as leaders. And if you want something to be important to the organisation, it's got to be important to the leader that your people see every day, whether that's a junior manager or it's a C-suite member. You know, it needs to be important in how people show up every day. In WBA, we believe really firmly in this, and we go as far as to make it so important that we put it right at the heart of our performance objectives for all of our leaders, and that effectively drives remuneration and reward too. So we put it right at the heart of how we drive people's accountability in the business to make it owned by all, not just owned kind of by a few. We've put huge amounts of resource in place at a global level to help us, you know, leverage the resources and the experiences we have across the organisation. So we've created a number of business resource groups that really support this agenda, and they act as powerful forums and certainly very powerful catalysts for change. You know, in the last 4 or 5 months, we've established, as an example, a racial equality action board. We've harnessed a huge amount of energy that was in the business to make big progress and big strides. We've created a board. We asked people to volunteer. We've had over 40 people from right the way across the business of every colour and creed to be part of that group. We've written a very bold manifesto that declares our intent to create a truly anti-racist culture in our organisation, and we've built a number of pillars of activity which really talk about our organisation in every facet. So we talk about the fact we want to have an attitude of continuously learning. Clearly, we want to work in building a truly inclusive and diverse team, but we've also challenged ourselves to really go deep on how we develop our brands and how we present ourselves to our consumers as a brand owner, and ultimately how we all hold each other to account.
So if I was a leader and I was thinking, right, I want my business to be successful, I think I'd be pretty foolish to ignore the key messages that I've just mentioned. And I think directionally, the question of having an option has been significantly reduced. And then to answer the part B of your question then, so why should it be integrated into the fabric of the organisation? Just picking up on a couple of points from Annie then. So I think talent genuinely responds to inclusive leaders right across the whole of the business, not just part of it, i.e. when it's not just buried away in HR. And I think from all the experience of businesses, the audits that I've overseen with the national and global equality standards, there's often this disconnect that exists between intent, i.e. we want to do the right thing, and impact. So how does this really impact on the ground? And until you get really forensic and understand the dynamics of a business right throughout it, and understand, and by the way, not just in HR, and then understand those directly and indirectly, it's really difficult to have a proper functioning business that focuses on D&I. So the headline for me, I don't think this is any more a question of maybe we should leave it in HR. I think you're putting yourself at a real disadvantage, both legally, morally, and professionally.
You know, over the last couple of months, in particular with everything that's happened within the wider world, the team and I have seen an insurmountable amount of burden and stress on those D&I practitioners and people officers who are trying to do absolutely everything. This is collective, as you say, Arun, is something that we cannot afford to ignore because it's business imperative, and feeds right back into what was said. Start with the business resource groups from yourself, Annie. It's a business imperative. They are business resource groups.
We've sort of upped the ante over the last couple of months as well, because we've launched our manifesto for racial equality, and each one of our leaders actually has an objective, and they have to demonstrate how they are actually contributing to creating the environment that the co-op that we're trying to achieve, which is an inclusive environment that has got an anti-racist stance. And we're obviously providing tools and backup and support from a development perspective, and making that very bespoke around how each individual can create inclusivity within their own team. But it comes to the wider organisation as well, because you're absolutely right. I'm obviously an HR professional, I have been for some time, but if you only focus on the D&I and the belonging agenda in HR, you will fail. Because it won't create an inclusive environment. It might mean you have some great policies and practices, but somebody may start and then work with a leader who actually doesn't understand. So it is really important. And when you look at our manifesto, what we're talking about is we talk about our people, but we also talk about the communities that we operate and work within, and how we ensure that we are being inclusive in the way that we operate with our communities, the way we allocate funds to our communities, and also from a commercial perspective, so the products and services that we offer and the suppliers that we deal with. So I think it comes back to a lot of what Arun was saying around the governance structure. If you want to take this seriously, you have to take it as seriously as the rest of the governance structure in your organisation. That way you will actually make traction. Well, that's very kind of you to say. I think what we've all got to acknowledge first is that we are all learning, and we will all continue to learn, and that nobody's got all the answers, but we have to be prepared to stand up and have those difficult conversations. And I think there are some very old adages that ring true when you start these kind of conversations that are difficult, because we're talking about colour, we're talking about race, we're talking about religion, we're talking about the LGBTQ plus networks. You know, you have to listen, and you have to put yourself in a place where essentially you know nothing, because you only have your own personal experience, you don't have anyone else's. So the opportunity to start those conversations is by asking questions and really taking time to listen and to understand, because no matter how much time you spend talking to people, you will never be an expert. So all you can do is to listen and to learn, and by learning, we start to put in place actions that are going to make a difference. You can't just sit and decide in a room in an ivory tower what your actions might be to be a more inclusive or an organisation that welcomes everyone, creating social mobility.
You know, those leaders of the future, and I'm quite convinced this is the case, especially with our so many different generations now in the workforce. You know, purpose-led leadership and really meaning what we say is, you know, often you know, far more important than purely financials, and obviously it's great for business as well. Any further thoughts, Arun?
I spend a lot of my time in boardrooms, and I will go and sit and speak to board members or chairmen, and I'm often faced with always really good intent, but just a genuine lack of understanding or belief. I have to say, I caveated that changed after Black Lives Matter, or at least it did on the surface. But in the build-up to, I guess, running the business that we run at EY, the one thing that's definitely carried through is to be non-judgmental in those conversations. I'm totally cool with them not fully understanding the dynamics of some of the nuances around D&I. And I actually think there's a big difference between somebody who genuinely wants to understand whether they're going to make more money if they put somebody disabled or black onto their board, as opposed to somebody who is on more of the right, the political agenda, who just doesn't care. And I'm often faced with the former of those. So, and if I'm honest, I wasn't entirely convinced by the business case either, when the world of D&I has a habit of recycling what everybody else says. And I'd say that the amount of conferences I sat at, I could written down what I was about to hear somebody say. Actually, this has been refreshing because I haven't heard a lot of those things said. So yeah, that's good to hear. But I genuinely think that a way to have a successful, difficult conversation is firstly be open and receptive to their genuine belief set, because that's all right, they hold it.
And we've always, as a business at WBA, prided ourselves on the amount of time we invest in listening to our people. We're a retail business first and foremost, and so we do spend a lot of time kind of listening, but we've really ramped that up in the last few months, and I think we've done it brilliantly, because working remotely and virtually has, you know, been another challenge, but we've really encouraged people to, in small groups, talk, and for leaders to listen. If there was advice I'd give the people watching, it's never underestimate the value of listening. And to Helen's point, you know, be prepared to unlearn some stuff, because and it changes all the time. So you just got to have that continuous learning mindset. But I've felt probably more personal leadership growth through that relationship that I've cultivated than I have in the last 20 years of my career.
And I think when you look in this space, I think if I was to reflect on what's working, what's changed in our organisation, I think it's about speaking up. And we do have a leadership capability that's around speaking up. But if I was to give advice about what I think works in organisations, I think it's people being prepared to stand up and to say, you're perhaps not aware, but something's going on in our organisation, because none of our organisations, particularly when you get to a certain size, are perfect. And I think the only way that you start to make progress is taking a stand and then giving people the space to speak up.